This is the AWOL Vision LTV 3000 Pro, which might just be the best projector I've ever used. This is also my first time ever using an ultra short throw projector. As somebody who's particularly new to the projector scene, I haven't heard of AWOL before, but based out of Miami, Florida since 2020, they've definitely created an awesome projector, so I do want to give a huge thanks to them for sending this out my way, alongside their floor-raising ALR screen. Now, for reference on where I'm coming from in terms of media and gaming, I typically use either a 55-inch LG OLED TV, a 75-inch 4K TCL TV, or any mix of gaming monitors. The thing is, none are quite like the experience you get from gaming or watching something on a massive 120-inch screen like this. And when it comes down to this experience, I will be diving into gaming on my PlayStation 5, as well as watching a whole lot of content on both the included Fire Stick, as well as my Apple TV. And if you do have any questions, or 2 or 3, please be sure to leave them down below in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer any sort of questions over the next couple weeks. I'll also have timestamps down below if you do want to jump around different sections of this video. But jumping into the unboxing, you've got the instruction manual, which does have all the throw distances you might be wondering about, so be sure to check this out if you are thinking about your own setup. Of course, you've got the warranty card, which you do want to register your product, the Amazon Fire Stick 4K, which is what allows you to drive this thing out of box right away, the power lead, as well as an AV input cable. And just in case you need it, there is a microfiber cloth for cleaning the lens. Setting up this floor-rising anti-light reflecting screen though, it's also pretty easy to set up. You do have this remote to raise and lower the screen, a pre-paired dongle which does sync the projector to the screen itself, as well as some pads for the bottom of the screen. Definitely use these because the screen housing is all metal and you definitely don't want to scratch your floor. When it comes down to the projector itself, the setup is actually pretty basic. Simply open the rear housing, plug in the included Fire Stick 4K into both the power and the HDMI, and away you go. For my setup, I've gone ahead and set the projector up about 13.6 inches away to give myself that 120-inch screen. And in case you are curious, here's a screenshot of all the throw distances for different size screens. Now, even though mine's on the floor, this can be ceiling mounted as well, which is pretty sweet, and I might be doing this in the near future. If you are wondering what sort of ports you have on this projector, you have 3 HDMI ports, and one of those is used inside the housing for that Fire Stick 4K. The other 2 HDMI ports I'll personally be using for my PlayStation 5 or my Apple TV. If you do have a home theater sound system, you're going to want to use this eARC supported HDMI for that specifically. For other ports, you do have 2 USB 2.0 ports for your own media content, another sound specific optical port, 1 LAN port, AV audio, as well as a service port. But ports aside, I do want to jump into how good this projector simply looks once you're into it, and honestly, this is one of those experiences you simply cannot replicate on a TV or monitor. With 3000 peak lumens and a triple laser setup, this thing really does get incredibly bright. For my basement specifically, it can get pretty dark during the night times, but even with this window during the daytime, it's very much viewable even with the brightest time of day. Even if I do need to throw on my lights, here's how it looks when the lights are on in my basement versus when they're off. Again, for my space, I've gone ahead and set this up about 14 inches away from the actual screen just so I can get that 120-inch screen size, but you can always adjust this to your liking. Not that I've used many projectors in the past, but when it does come down to clarity, this is by far the clearest image I've seen for a projector. Using a pure glass Ricoh f2.0 lens, this really does give a great image. And if you are worried about damaging your delicate eyeballs with this super bright laser, there are some sensors on the projector itself that do cut out the image if you do get too close. When it does come down to the color coverage on this projector, you are getting 147% of the DCI-P3 color gamut, which is just about in line with actual theaters you might go to, so this really does bring a great in-home theater experience. Likewise, I haven't noticed any sort of rainbowing at all, which is pretty sweet, and typically my camera would actually pick that up, so kudos to AWOL. But what I personally love most about this projector is actually the gaming performance. The built-in turbo mode here does put the projector into a low latency mode, giving you 4K 60Hz at 15 milliseconds or 1080p 120Hz at 8 milliseconds. I've had the pleasure of jumping into first-person shooter games, racing, adventure, and every single one of those has been a great experience. Jumping into games like Cyberpunk 2077 really showcase how badass this looks in 4K HDR. For myself, it definitely comes down to the wicked saturation in the dark spaces. Not to mention all of this is on a massive 100-inch screen. And I can definitely say the same beautiful image carries over from the media side of things over to the gaming experience, and even at 4K, the 15 millisecond response time is near instant. And it's not just Cyberpunk, pretty much any sort of open world games in general are going to look incredible on here, and you're really going to dig the immersive experience. If you are going to be jumping into FPS games like Call of Duty or Overwatch, I've opted to swap this over to the 1080p 120Hz mode since a higher refresh rate makes all the difference in a game like this. Now, I can't say I'm particularly good at Call of Duty specifically, but it is still a good time. On something like Overwatch though, I'm absolutely killer. As somebody who does play competitive games on a monitor, I can't say it's going to have the same sort of motion clarity, but it's most definitely playable. Now, are you going to be pushing your competitive rank on this projector? No, probably not, but FPS games are still great, with non-FPS games still being the absolute sweet spot. Now, as somebody who's currently studying cinema on my spare time, this projector quite actually could not come at a better time for me personally. Right now, I've been diving into Hollywood films, indie films, YouTube creators, animated, and just about everything in between. Getting a good sense of all the different types of content I've been watching on here really do give me a good sense of how well this projector performs. Even for cinema purists, I'm sure you'll really enjoy it. This does also have Dolby Vision support, HDR10 and 10 Plus, as well as HLG. If we are talking about straight cinema as well, I've really enjoyed the 24 FPS mode on this projector, since that's the actual frame rate that I shoot all my videos in. Using that 24 FPS mode, I did recently watch Oppenheimer on here for the first time, since I did miss that in theaters, and I can imagine this is probably the next best thing. I've also recently decided to finally start watching those Studio Ghibli animated films, which do look great on here. I've never really been into anime outside of, say, Dragon Ball, so this new experience as a whole has been one of those things I'm really looking forward to on my Fridays. If you are heavy into sports, this does have a smooth motion feature, which should make watching games a little bit better with frame insertion. Not something I'd personally use, but I imagine this would be big for some people, especially if you do frequent going to bars or restaurants and love to watch big games on a projector. From a contrast ratio perspective as well, we are looking at 2500 to 1, so blacks really do look black and the colors do not suffer whatsoever. Again, I can mostly control all the lighting in my space apart from that small window, but even still, the image is super viewable with my lights on or off like I mentioned before. And again, here's that quick comparison when I'm playing my PlayStation 5. If you do want to fuss with the color profiles, there are a bunch of presets here from vivid, sports, to movies, plus you can always set and calibrate your own profile if you want to do that instead. This projector does also support 3D movies, which isn't something that I've really enjoyed since 2008 or so. While I don't personally have the 3D glasses to test this myself, it is something the projector supports and you can buy those separately. Getting back to that 36 watt speaker though, I imagine most people kitting out their projector setup like this might have some sort of awesome sound system, but for myself as somebody who's sort of new to the projector space, this speaker is beyond fine for me. I just chose to turn on the virtual DTS setting, and I only set my volume to like 10%, and that is loud enough. I can't say I'll really go beyond this for the sake of my sleeping toddler at night. Here are a quick sound test for music, cinema, as well as gaming.
I got you! I got you!
And yeah, if you really do want to push it, these speakers will absolutely boom through your entire house. And I can happily say that when it comes down to the passive sound of the projector itself, I could only read about 35 to 43 decibels on my iPhone, which is actually pretty sweet. In all of my testing, watching content, and gaming, I can't say this fan was noticeable whatsoever. The one thing I can say is that you're probably not going to want to place your projector on a rug like myself, since that does actually muffle the sound quite a bit, especially since this is front firing and it's going directly into my couch. If I'm to guess, I'd probably give this projector maybe 3 to 4 feet of space just to breathe and actually let these speakers do what they're supposed to. Either way, those front firing speakers blend right into the projector's body, and I really can't complain. Of course, when it does come down to external audio, you could probably use a combination of the optical port, Bluetooth speakers, as well as the HDMI with eARC. Talking about the projector body itself, this thing actually looks pretty sweet. I sort of see it as a giant PlayStation 5 on its side, and I think it looks pretty nice. It has a mix of a matte black and glossy finish with side firing vents, as well as a power button on the top end. And as mentioned before, there is a series of sensors on the projector itself, such as the one on the front, which is the infrared for all your remotes. There's also these 2 proximity sensors on the top end, which will cut that laser like I mentioned before, and turning this projector over on the bottom side, you do have these basin holes for mounting on your ceiling, as well as the adjustable feet. Now you might also be wondering what sort of features this projector has itself, and I can say it's actually pretty minimalistic for once. I've seen a good chunk of projectors simply try and cut corners when it comes down to software, and it just leads to a poor user experience. From a user-centric perspective, it seems like this projector is meant to lean into the user-chosen systems, which I can definitely appreciate. Of course, the included Fire TV stick is a great option right out of box with support for all the popular streaming apps you might want. I personally use the Apple TV, so realistically that'll probably remain my go-to alongside my PlayStation 5. Still, the Fire Stick does do everything I could need it to do. One thing that is pretty sweet too, if you do have a smart home setup either through Google or Alexa, you can set up some pretty sweet automations, but that's not something that I'll be trying today. Another thing you might need is keystoning depending on how your setup is. You can adjust the image to your needs and then just focus the image where needed. Ultimately, if you are trying to watch your own media as well, you can use a USB or hard drive to plug right into the side to access your own videos, which is always a nice touch. Now, I spent a whole lot of time talking about what I absolutely love about this projector, so in this case, what's missing? I think for myself, when it comes down to gaming, I would have loved to see HDMI 2.1. To be more clear though, that isn't a limitation of this projector whatsoever, but rather all DLP projectors. Maybe we'll see that tech in the next 5 to 10 years, but beyond that, this is a higher end projector experience, and it's all sort of new to me, so if you think I'm missing something, please let me know. But taking everything I've mentioned into consideration, who is this projector for? Honestly, I think it's for anybody who truly wants to jump into a home theater setup. Being particularly new to high performance projectors, it's hard to see what else I'd personally want from this. Movies and cinema are absolutely out of this world, not to mention the gaming performance on a massive screen is an experience on its own. I can see this being pretty big for somebody who might need to relocate frequently, since you can't really fit a big TV in the back of your car seat, but you can definitely fit this projector. Ultimately, I think this is probably best for cinema purists and content lovers. But again, I do want to give a huge thanks to AWOL for sending this out my way. I'll leave the links down below in the video description, as well as my discount code if you do want to check this out. Appreciate you watching till the end. Till next time.